In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to install some front and rear shock struts. We're doing bilstein 4600 in this. And then we use our shocks from the front that are already there. So we use a spring compressor. You can rent one free at your local AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Impact, various socket sizes, usually mostly 14, 17 and 19 millimeters. We'll start with the front and let's get started. First, we'll take off our wheels using a 21 millimeter socket. So my technique is to do the front passenger and the front driver at the same time. Main reason is because you can't really torque this main nut right here, this 19 millimeter that's at the bottom of the shock, until you get your full weight. So I just do both sides. Another reason is you want to have the arrangements of the top hat to the spring to the bottom note correctly. So I'll show you later, but it's easier to reference when you have one that's not taken apart, and you can just compare the orientation of the 3 bolts at the top hat to the bottom nut, so you can just do it once and have everything aligned right away, versus taking a picture or making marks. I mean, you could also do it that way. I'm also going to be replacing the top hats with some KYBs. These are recommended. I bought my SUV used, so I'm not sure how many miles are on these top hats. Of course, these are shot, as you can tell. And all right, let's get started. We'll loosen the bottom 19 millimeter bolt right there. And then we'll do this top link right there, which is a 14 millimeter. And then we'll do the 3 14 millimeters on top. 19 millimeter bolt apart. Work on the top 14 millimeter bolt. These guys in the back there. And then just use a little hammer to go through that. And then we'll use one of these guys to finish the rest off. Make sure you don't ruin your threads down here. Some people take the bolts off their lower ball joint right here. I had enough room. I mean, mine's the stock height, no rust. So if you do feel like you need to drop the lower control arm, remove these 4, you have a little more room. And I'll finish the rest of the way through. And this should just drop down after I remove that 3rd bolt right there. So here's both of my front shocks out. As you can see, this is why I'm changing it. And you can see the orientation of the top hat to the bottom. So when you put your new bilstein or whatever you bought, you want the orientation of the nuts to kind of correspond with that. So you can just don't have to keep compressing your springs and adjusting. So we'll get started on compressing the springs. So this is how you set up the spring compressor. You can use a 24 or just use a little crescent wrench. Put it on both sides. And then we'll compress until we see a little gap there between the top hat. So we can remove that middle bolt right there. Here's a spring compressed. Use your old bushing on top. Just go slowly, and you might have a little tension when it pops off, but if you compress these enough, it should not be dangerous at all. New one, side by side. Remember, we'll orient the top hat and the bottom mount bolt just so it lines up just like that one. And then bilstein includes an extra bolt and bushing, so we'll make sure we use our KYB top hat. Alright, make sure we'll look at the orientation of the old spring with the top hat and the bottom bolt orientation, because obviously this is spinning freely. So there's a washer in there. bushings like that, and there's the nut bolt right there, and these are all supplied with bilstein. And then when you won't have your orientation correctly, you'll pinch down this with a crescent wrench, and then you'll turn this 17mm bolt, and then you can decompress your spring. So just put the old spring next to it. We'll have these lined up like so, and then we'll just orient these studs as best as we can. And here's the setup for the top. We need a little crescent wrench, and then actually this is a 19mm. Here's with the spring compressors off. You do the best you can. There's a chance you have to compress and line up the top hats again, but that's pretty darn close. So we'll see how it goes on. Obviously it doesn't line up perfectly, as you can see. It's kind of cockeyed a little bit. So I just made a little mark. We'll compress it and then move it over a little bit and hopefully it lines up. All right, everything's lined up. And then down here. And this, we won't torque until we have full weight on the suspension. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. And then some people do remove the lower ball joint. Nuts right there. Those are torqued down to 59 foot-pounds when you're all done. And this will be 101 pounds. And since it's hard to get a torque wrench in there, just kind of do a little snug and then a quarter turn. One. It's about 4 threads. You can kind of match that. We'll compress it and then go on to the now we'll do the rear shocks. Pretty simple. It's just a little tight up in there. But basically it's just 2 bolts. So move your wheel, 1 bolt there, and then 1 up here. This is how it sits. These 2 pieces are below the frame. This whole piece right here, I'll show you guys. This is above it. This piece is above it as well. And that's what you're pushing up into your frame. You can see where the rust spots are. This sandwiches the frame. So basically you're going back there, reaching. As long as you hold this boot, you'll be able to take off that 19mm bolt. So basically you do the same. You have a bunch of washers. Some are the larger holes to fit on this bottom part. So you'll have this at the very bottom. Next is the bushing. And then a smaller washer with a larger hole. And then this goes up and up into the frame. Then you have these guys left. Alright, here's the top of the shock. There's a little notch on the stem right there. You just put a little monkey wrench. And on top is a 22mm. So here's the setup. Right now, this is the bolt that's on top of the strut. You'll have your monkey wrench below the frame, and this 22mm on top of the frame, and just tighten down to 15 foot-pounds, which is pretty light. Bottom mount, 64 foot-pounds, and again, 15 foot-pounds on the top mount. All right, so sitting on top of your frame, once you feed your rear shock in, you have 1 washer that has this groove in the middle. It's like it fits like a key. This is the stock one. So on top of the frame, there's a little notch that this will fit inside. And if you look at your bilstein, only one of those washers will have, the rest will be flat like this.